Welcome to the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. We provide fiction reviews for the lit curious reader because why not try a little bit of everything? Our scholarish approach and cozy book club atmosphere makes literature accessible to everyone, whether you're a casual reader or a devoted bookworm. Join us on our literary journey to explore all genres. Welcome to the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. I am Jennifer, and today Joey and I are having an affair with Ernest Hemingway and his short story, Hills Like White Elephants. And before we get started, Joey, I think it would be great to just do a little bit of background on Ernest Hemingway. I think most people are familiar with his work from possibly like high school English class or just the popular culture. And I think it's important for us to just kind of ground ourselves in where he was coming from. So here we go. Ernest Hemingway was born in 1899 and lived until 1961. He began his writing career as a journalist for the Kansas City Star, where he developed his concise and direct prose style, for which he is very well known. His experiences as a volunteer ambulance driver during World War I profoundly impacted his worldview and also showed up later in his writing. In the 1920s, Hemingway became a key figure in the lost generation of expatriate writers who were living in Paris at the time. His early works, including The Sun Also Rises from 1926 and A Farewell to Arms in 1929, captured the disillusionment and moral ambiguity of the post-war era with his signature sparse dialogue and understated emotion. You can say that again,
Yeah.
understated emotion. Throughout the 30s, Hemingway explored the themes of courage, death, and the natural world in novels like For Whom the Bell Tolls and To Have and Have Not. This was inspired by his time, this time as a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War. So, a lot of wartime strife he is rolling around in. So, fast forward us to the 1950s, where he achieved critical and commercial success with The Old Man and the Sea in 1952, a novella that earned him a Pulitzer Prize and contributed to his Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954, so about 7 years before his passing. His later work, such as A Movable Feast, was published after his death in 1964, and it had a very nostalgic look back at his years in Paris. So, just to conclude, wrap it up, who is Hemingway and why do we still care? Hemingway's influence on 20th century fiction is undeniable. His iceberg theory of writing, emphasizing subtext and omission, shaped generations of writers. Despite his later struggles with mental and physical health, not to mention alcoholism, his
hmm
literary legacy endures through his powerful and enduring works. So, Joey, anything else that you would like to add about Ernest Hemingway?
Yeah, I would. Because you paint him in a very nice light. And I'm not saying that I don't know him. I never met him, obviously. He died well before I was born. But I'm reluctant to really ever read Hemingway because of some of his life choices. He was a big game hunter in Africa. No, thank you, man. No, thank you. I do not want anyone hunting lions. Okay, I don't care how cool you think you look, Hemingway. You are not. And the way that he treated all of his ex-wives, because he had quite a list of them, and basically didn't basically he gaslit them, each and every one of them. So that was fun. And so I think I have a complicated relationship, or not, I don't have a relationship with him as an author, but I have a hard time overlooking those things in him as a human being. But I do think that there are some very interesting things that came up this time while I was looking up stuff about his life. For the first 6 years of his life, his mother treated him as a girl. And I think that kind of shows maybe why he was so determined to become like this very macho man, like the epitome of manliness and virility. I think he went in like the complete opposite direction once he was able to control his gender identity. And it's also very interesting that one of his children was a transgender woman. Her name was Gloria. And obviously, there was a lot of tension, and I'm sure that they did not have a great relationship if they did at all. Which, although I have seen that his daughter, Gloria, who's a transgender woman, was described as being a cross dresser, which is very different. That's a fetish and not a gender identity. So I just want to make sure if that comes, if we, for whatever reason, if we were to talk about that, I just want to make it clear to everybody that's listening that those are very different things. Those are not, these are not the same.
Thank you, Joy. I really appreciate that you bring up his personal life because often on this podcast, we will say, hey, I may not resonate with the life choices that the author has made, but I do appreciate what their literary style is and what they've contributed to the canon. And I
Hmm.
do know that I think there were in the last, we'll say, during the pandemic time, I believe a comprehensive documentary about Hemingway and his life, bringing up all of those issues that you have just expressed, were really beautifully laid out to the American public. And that was the first time that I had heard some of this backstory. And I do think it is
Hmm.
really interesting, as we often say, how much of an author's personal life, good, bad, and indifferent, comes out and is expressed through their characters. And thank you also for reminding us that a person who chooses to be a cross dresser, right, who puts on the costuming of a
Hmm.
person whose gender does not match them, that does not make you a transgendered person. That is a different thing. And I think perhaps in the time in which his daughter was expressing herself, maybe those terms were not clearly articulated and defined because this is all new territory for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah, actually, I was watching a video. It was like on YouTube of someone that is alive right now and is commenting on things called this person a crossdresser called Gloria a crossdresser. And I was like, excuse me, sir. No, these are not the same. Do some research. But I do, but I'm sure if you have anything else to add, do just want to mention that I did not know this about Ernest Hemingway that well, I did know he was in a lot of literary circles. He knew F. Scott Fitzgerald and other big names in the literary world, and he knew famous actors and actresses like Marlene Dietrich that we were just talking about the other day with Clarice Lispector. But he was also friends with Gertrude Stein, the writer and poet. I don't know if she did any prose writing. I only know her from her poetry. But I can definitely see where she sort of rubbed off on him because she is very sparse in her poetry, and at least what I have read, where she is extremely hard to understand sometimes. Ernest Hemingway is not. He is not hard to understand. And that was one thing that I was like, oh, I can see the influence in that in your writing now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joey. I think it is fascinating when we can see these parallels. It's like who you're hanging out with will influence at times the art that you choose to make. And I
Hmm.
think that's really great. And I also know in my business life, we talk about the different generations in the workforce. And Ernest Hemingway's guys are in the silent generation, right? They are known
Hmm.
for their brevity, their lack of emotional content. It's like just say the facts, the bare minimum, you guys will figure it out. And I think that is a stark contrast to some of the ways that we have been socialized as the generations have proceeded. So I think that's also very interesting. He is, the old man in the sea. I'm like, no kidding. The old man in the C suite. Like that is Ernest Hemingway running the show. He
Oh
is
my
very,
god.
very clear. So Joey,
That's
sorry for,
hilarious.
yeah. So
You
Joey,
should
that's
write
kind
a short story about that. The old
that
man in the C-suite.
yeah, that is where my head is at. So let's transition our conversation to the short story that we both read, which this was my perhaps not first time reading it, but I did not remember all the key details. So I'd like
Mhm.
to read a summary so we are all starting at the same place. Hills Like White Elephants by Ernest Hemingway unfolds at a Spanish train station where an American man and a young woman named Jig await a train to Madrid. Their seemingly casual conversation reveals a tense and unspoken conflict. Jig observes the nearby hills resembling white elephants, triggered a discussion about an operation, in quotes, the man wants her to have. It becomes clear that he is pressuring her to have an abortion, arguing it's a simple procedure that will allow their relationship to return to its previous carefree state. Jig grapples with the decision, questioning the man's assurances and the potential loss of their connection. The white elephant's metaphor evolves, symbolizing both the unwanted pregnancy and something precious yet burdensome between them. The stark contrast between the barren landscape and the distant fertile fields also mirrors Jig's internal struggle between a childless future with this man in front of her that she knows and the unknown path of motherhood on her own. Ultimately, Jig asserts her agency, leaving the reader to ponder her true feelings and uncertain future of their relationship. And I love that she states she's fine, which definitely leads the reader to ponder what's really going on with her in saying she's fine. And
Mhm.
as we had stated earlier, Hemingway famously employs the iceberg theory, leaving so much unsaid and forcing the reader to infer for themselves the profound emotional weight beneath the surface of the dialogue. So, Joey, anything else that you would like to add to that summary? It's a really short story. The
No.
summary felt almost as long as the story,
Yeah.
legitimately.
Yeah, it's like 6 pages or something. No, I think that's what happens. That's it.
Awesome. So, Joey, would you like to share with us your initial impressions of Hills Like White Elephants?
Sure. I have read this before. I read it in high school, so I'm one of those people who did read that in high school. I didn't remember literally everything, but I remembered the gist of this story. I knew it was about abortion. And I'm still struggling to maybe separate the author from the work. I can see that he has contributed a lot to the literary canon and landscape, and I can appreciate that. But bro, I don't know if I can get over it for him, but I'm going to challenge myself and read The Old Man and the Sea because that's his shortest work. I was gonna read For Whom the Bell Tolls. I'm like, no, that's like almost 500 pages. I can't sign up for something like that yet. So I'm gonna read that and see if I can form my opinion about him a little bit more instead of just basing it off of one short story. I'm sure I've read other things by him, but I don't remember. I probably read For Whom the Bell Tolls in high school and I don't remember it. But anyway, this story is very quiet and very subtle. And you did a great job of explaining the iceberg theory because it is so important to talk about that when you're talking about Hemingway in particular, because everything is very much implied within the story. It's happening in between the lines. And we're just seeing this sort of shorthand conversation between two people who know each other to some capacity, enough to have had sex and get pregnant. I mean, and to have traveled to quite a few places at least. So we don't know how long their relationship or their dalliance maybe more that's more of Hemingway's vibe there. This time when I was reading it, I really focused on the climax of the story, which I do want to just quickly define what a climax in literature is because it's one of those things that a lot of people talk about, but I don't know that someone could just like say, "Oh, this is exactly what that is." But in this case, I want it to be well, not that I'm choosing a definition, but there's like different types. Anyway, so let me rephrase that. The climax involves the protagonist making a crucial decision or confronting their greatest challenge. So the American, obviously he goes unnamed, has to make a decision, and that's the climax. So he can either shut the hell up like Jake wants him to, or he can continue and bypass her boundary that she set. And so I think that's for me, for whatever reason, and I read this quite a few times because it's so short. So it's nice that it like lends itself to be able to do that. Kept sort of stopping at that scene when that happens and wondering like, well, what would this do to the story if he did stop talking, if he did respect Jake's boundaries. And to be honest, I don't think this story would have ended differently. I think either way, they have to get on that train. But maybe what Jake's final answer would have been different. But I don't think that there's not really a plot necessarily, unless it's like them waiting for a train and them going to get to the train. I don't think that that part would end differently. But that's what I was paying attention to this time. I don't know why.
Yeah, Joey, thank you for saying that. And I failed to mention that this story was written in 1927. So
Yeah.
we're almost 100 years out from when this story was conceived and came into the world. So I think we're living in very, very different times. And I
Hmm.
was so sad. Like this story just made me personally very sad and
Hmm.
very annoyed. And also made me think, oh, is this why we talk about like the quote unquote elephant in the room? Like, this is also a play for me on that phrase. Oh, by the way, unplanned pregnancy, don't know what we're going to do, but we don't actually say the words out loud. And we don't actually say, do you want to have a baby? And we don't say, do you actually want to terminate my pregnancy? You just kind of use these very vague terms. So I thought, interesting, the elephant in the room. Her agency that sort of gets validated by the bartender, a female character who also is unnamed. So we have the American man, we have the
Hmm.
girl who is with child, we have another female called the woman who is the bartender. And I thought it was very interesting that subtle indication that the American man is with a girl. She's not also a woman. She is not a young lady. She is called a girl. And I think it was the emphasis of, oh, right, this may be a more inexperienced, young, optimistic person who is along for the ride with her dashing American person. And Joy, I appreciated that you said, oh, look, they were together long enough to conceive a child. Like we've got that check mark, right? And
Mm.
also, when she asked him, it's like, would you please? And she says, please, 7 times. And I'm going to read that sentence at some point during this podcast because I just loved it so much because I'm like, been there, done that. Oh my God, would you just please stop talking? She's like, would you please stop talking? And he stops for a minute and then he looks at the floor and he looks at the bags and he sees all of the tags from all the hotels they have slept in. And then he's
Mhm.
like, oh, just one more thing. I'm just going to bring this back up, just like one more thing. And I was like, did she not just tell you? And the female bartender looked over there and kind of interjected and stopped that scene for a moment, which I thought was, again, even 100 years ago, there were female allies who were like, oh my gosh, somebody needs to just break this action for a minute so this girl can take a breath because this man is clueless about the impact that he is having on this situation. And I just really appreciated that. And the old cliche, which I also am like, is this where this originated? When you ask a woman, how is she doing? And she says, I'm fine. It's fine, Joey.
I
Just
feel like
ask me how it's going. I'm like, it's fine. And you're like, oh no, no, fine is never fine. And I love that Hemingway, the king of the iceberg, the unspoken text. I'm like, but if you didn't know and you thought fine meant I'm fine, I'm okay, there's no problem, nothing to discuss, move on, please. How would you know?
yeah, I think that, like, this is where you have to let me only speak for myself, obviously. This is where I have to try and determine, where does the author end in this story, or is the author ever present in this story? Because based on Hemingway's actual life, okay, it feels like he wouldn't be able to understand. Well, you know what? That's not true. He had a lot of practice with women. So maybe he just knew it and just didn't care in his real life and didn't apply to it. But he obviously understands the nuance of relationships between heterosexual cisgender men and women, because he had partook in so many of them. No shade to that, okay? That's not a problem. Just the way
Practice
he
makes perfect, Joey.
Yeah, I
Practice makes
guess.
perfect.
Although he told his second wife, he was like, "Well, you stole me away from my first wife, so now it's only kind of fair that this one takes me away from you." It feels like that's a you problem, like karma got your ass back. But anyway,
Wow, I
yeah,
love that mentality, Joey. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
Hemingway,
it's like,
he is
okay,
not on the good guy list for sure.
yeah, he can go screw. Anyway, because that's like, obviously this is a very nuanced conversation. It's all implicit, as we have just been discussing. Like, this is the iceberg theory. This is a great example. If you did not know what that was and what it looks like in practice, this is exactly it. He has to have understood pretty much a lot about women, is what I'm getting at, which feels like so different from the author, because he was like emotionally detached or stunted, is what I would say, for a variety of reasons. But it just feels like he knows how Jig feels. He's not writing it from the American's perspective and only giving us he's not writing it from any perspective. He's writing it as like the detached narrator in this case. So he's just giving us like a play by play. Like, this is what happened. And I think it's interesting. He was also a journalist. And so he's giving us like objective facts about what's going on in this scenario, in this scene, or in this story, rather. So we have to make that determination. So it's so odd to me. And it feels like, how do you reconcile the author with this story? Because, like I said, you have to understand both perspectives. He has to understand what it feels like to be this American man, and he also has to understand what it would feel like to be Jig and have someone sort of coerce you into getting an abortion. And this man is certainly gaslighting her and is trying to convince her. He's at one point he says something really weird that I don't understand. What it's at, hold on, let me look it up because I want to read the exact quote. You probably know what I'm going to talk about. He says, I know you wouldn't mind a Jig, talking about the abortion. It's really not anything. It's just to let the air in. And he says that twice. He says it 2 lines later. The girl did not say anything. "I'll go with you and I'll stay with you all the time." They just let the air in and then it's all perfectly natural. And I was like, "Bro, what are you talking about? The air? What do you think they just like blow air into a cervix or something? Like, what are you thinking is going on?" I'm sure that he was trying to make it seem less invasive than it actually would be in real life. But to me, that was very strange. But anyway, my point is not to talk about the operation part of it, but to be like, this is a weird dynamic for me because I can't reconcile the author and his work in this point.
But Joy, I have to take you back to the operation because I'm
Mhm,
thinking this is 1929. This is abroad. This is in Spain. This is not in Middleville, Ohio. Okay. So this is a very different thing. In the
mhm.
1920s, women in America were just given the right to vote, right? There were
Yeah.
no legalized abortions. There were no quote unquote operations that I was aware of at this early time publicized in America. So I think it's also interesting that it happened overseas. And I
Mhm.
think I was confused about the whole, oh, you just let the air in. And for me, again, I love subtext. I love creating my own story. I'm like, oh, I always know what everyone is saying. We're like, good morning, Jennifer. I'm like, oh, there's a whole story behind that. Like, I know
You
really
son of
what
a
that meant.
bitch.
I'm like, really? So I had a field day with this because I was like, okay, they just let the air in. I'm like, you know what? We just let in here, people? The truth. This man is older, wiser. She sees some writing on this beaded curtain, which I love that opening paragraph, Joey. I just loved it. I was like,
Mhm,
oh, that's so, as you said, journalistic. Like you can picture the scene. You are right there. You don't have to stretch yourself. You can just be right there. They're just like, what's written on the curtain? And he tells her. And then the woman says, 5 minutes to the train comes. And she's like, what did she say? And she's like, oh, 5 minutes to the train comes. He tells her that. So again, it's this older man in my mind guiding her as a sort of innocent, as a person who is relying on him for information and for her travel and for her future. What is her fate going to be as a single woman in 1930s Spain? I'm not thinking it's great. That doesn't seem like a really great thing, unless she says my husband was killed in the war, but the war was already over by then. So a little shady
mhm,
on the timing. But it was the truth that this person says he loves you. And I want to believe that he does love her in the capacity that he could. But he makes that peculiar statement that he was like, I love you, but I just want you. I don't want anyone else. And
mhm,
I thought, oh, you mean like another girlfriend? It's like, no, like another kid. Like, I just want this carefree life where we go from town to town to town. She says, one of the things that they do is they look at things and they drink. That's pretty much it. And from what I have heard about Hemingway's personal life, he did spend a lot of time looking around at things and sitting in bars and drinking to oblivion with the people around him. And that became a problem in his life. So
mhm.
when you said how much of Hemingway is in the story, I think for me it's a bit contaminated by what I have found out, in the last 10 years about the way in which he conducted his personal life. It put a pall over these tragic stories because these felt to me not just tragic stories that he painted on someone else, but he very well, in my worldview, could have been a guy having this conversation with a girl in a bar before he says, adios, amigo. We've got to catch the next train. I'm not signing up for the traditional path of fatherhood. And as we've often talked on this podcast, there was not reliable chemical contraception for women available until the late 1960s. So it was kind of go at your own risk, ladies. There weren't a lot of options to prevent pregnancy for women at that time. So I really felt she was just in a really tough spot.
Yeah, and I think from what I have read about Ernest Hemingway, in particular with relationship to his children and the idea of having children, once he was like, I don't necessarily want this. Like his second wife, Pauline, was a Catholic and she was anti contraception. And he was like, oh my God, I just want to wrap it up so we can get on. Okay. Like, I don't want to keep producing children. And then she ended up getting pregnant like very quickly after one of her previous pregnancies. And it was like a really risky deal for her because of that, because she just refused to use contraception. He, of course, was like, well, I'm not going to not do it. That's not an option. So guess we're just going to risk it for the biscuit. again, it's like it's hard for me to really take the author out of this story because I don't know like I'm not like I didn't read a biography about Ernest Hemingway. I don't think I would, but it's not like a tender story because the American is not being nice about this. He's being very manipulative, and Jig obviously does not want this, or at least that's how I imagined it, especially because in this it's very heavy on the dialogue. I think this would be a great staged performance. I'm sure it has been. I would probably see that. It would be like really short, it'd be like 8 minutes long, but maybe they could flesh it out.
With a 20-minute intermission for a
Yeah.
bar tour. So, like, everybody's
Yeah.
drinking before, we have an 8-minute play, and then we have 20 minutes in the bar.
Yeah. But in this section, obviously they're still talking about this. That's the whole story. But anyway, I'll just read this section. The girl stood up and walked to the end of the station. Across on the other side were fields of grain and trees along the banks of the Ebro. Far away beyond the river were mountains. The shadow of a cloud moved across the field of grain, and she saw the river through the trees. And we could have all this, she said, and we could have everything, and every day we make it more impossible. What did you say? I said we could have everything. We can have everything. No, we can't. It's it's hard to like respond to myself. No, we can't. We can have the whole world. No, we can't. We can go everywhere. No, we can't. It isn't ours anymore. It's ours. No, it isn't. And once they take it away, you never get it back. But they haven't taken it away. We'll wait and see. So obviously, we have another implied conversation. We could have all of this, but the decisions that we're making right now are making it impossible for us to have it all. But we can have it. And then he's trying to say, "No, no, 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 no. We'll still have the whole world for us." And she's like, "We'll have the whole world except for this one thing that I really want." And
And
so it's
you
this,
made me do. You
yeah,
forced me to do something so I could stay with you and we could, quote unquote, be happy.
yeah. And her excuse is that she'll do it because, and this is what he writes, quote, "because I don't care about me." So again, we have this super tragic story with Jig. My impression is the same as yours, Jennifer. He's specifically calling her the girl or Jig, which is most sounds like a nickname, but we don't know her age. We don't know where she originates from. We can guess that she doesn't speak Spanish because he has to read the sign for the beer on the curtain. And she either doesn't hear the waitress or she doesn't understand the waitress. And only this American man speaks Spanish. But we do not get any of that. Again, I filled in the blank, and that's my best guess based on textual, what was happening in the text. So we don't know if she has access to money. We don't know if she has anywhere to go, even if she could flee. If she's from the United States, does she have the ability to get back to the United States on her own? Does she even know how to do that? I'm not saying she's stupid, but if you're a woman in 1927 and you've always only relied on men to complete tasks for you, there would be no reason for her to know how to do that on her own. So we kind of get this sense that she's almost being held hostage at this. And I mean, that sounds very dramatic. I don't mean like he's like got a gun to her head, like I dare you to walk away. But what choice does she have over her own decisions? Because if she's like, well, I'll just do it because you want me to do it, then she obviously doesn't have a choice to go elsewhere. She can't be like, fine, I'll keep this baby. You can go gallivant around Europe or wherever you're headed off to, and like I'll go back to my family wherever that's from.
So I appreciate that. Could you indulge me for a moment? And you and I are
Mhm.
going to read the dialogue of the male female parts at the top of page 4,
Okay, I
just
wanna be
because
the girl.
I knew you wanted to be the girl, but I am so
No, that's okay. I'll
ready
be the dude, I'll be the dude.
to declare my pregnancy to you, Joey. So here we go. So
That will this is the only time that will ever
this is
happen
the only time this is
to
ever
me.
going to happen, Joey. So if you could start on the top of page 4 where I think it's the best thing to do.
So
Oh, this top of my page 4. I don't know where that is. Sorry.
I thought you were just saying, "I think that's the best thing for us to do is to start a page for it." And I was like, "Okay, yeah,"
It
and then I
is
read
and it
it.
is.
Okay,
So you're starting.
okay. I was gonna say, because who is it? Because obviously he doesn't tell us who is speaking. This is like a play, we're doing our own little
We're
play.
doing our own play for
Okay.
understanding.
I think it's the best thing to do, but I don't want you to do it if you don't really want to.
And if I do it, you'll be happy and things will be like they were and you'll love me.
I love you. This is so strange to say to each other. Okay. I love you now. You know I love you.
I know. But if I do it, then it will be nice again if I say things are like white elephants and you'll like it.
I love it now, but I just can't think about it. You know how I get when I worry.
If I do it, you won't ever worry.
I won't worry about that because it's perfectly simple.
Then I'll do it because I don't care about me.
What do you mean?
I don't care about me.
Well, I care about you.
Oh, yes, but I don't care about me. And I'll do it, and then everything will be fine. Everything will be fine, Joey. I'll do it. Everything will be fine.
Hmm. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, just one
Okay.
more.
I don't want you to do it if you feel that way.
Right. Sure, you do. So I
And
just,
scene.
end scene, yes. And I love the fact like it was important for me because I was getting, as I was reading this on my own, it was getting lost because as you mentioned, Hemingway doesn't say like the man said, the girl said, the man said, the
It
girl
would
said.
be
Very
redundant.
few
Yeah.
markers in there. So I'm like, who's saying what? It's like, oh, that makes sense. But again, it's just for me, the reason I wanted us to go through that scene in particular, not only so you could love me, Joey, because that's very
Hmm.
gratifying for me, but it is so,
Yeah.
even in imaginary terms, it was to show that this young lady just wants to do the thing that makes the man happy. So she's like, oh my gosh, I don't want you to worry. So if you are worried and this will stop your worrying, I will just do this because it doesn't matter what happens to me. I'm only concerned about your happiness.
Hmm.
And the reason I take us there is that we then go to the scene sort of near the end where it says, would you do something for me now? And the man says, I'll do anything for you. And the woman says, would you please, 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 please stop talking? He did not say anything, but looked at the bags against the wall of the station. There were labels on them from all the hotels where they had spent nights. But I don't want you to, he said. I don't care anything about it. I'll scream, said the girl. The woman came out through the curtain with 2 glasses of beer and put them down on the damp felt pads. The train comes in 5 minutes. What did she say? Asked the girl. That the train is coming in 5 minutes. The girl smiled brightly at the woman to thank her. And again, the subtext of like, thank you for interrupting this ridiculous conversation where I've asked the guy 7 times to stop speaking and he still will not drop the subject. So, as Joey, as you said, the gaslighting, my words, the intimidation, the sort of bullying of like, you're just going to do what I want, right? Because I'm only doing it for you, because I really care about you, but I mostly care about me, but I can't say that out loud. So just do what I tell you. And that was just so annoying to me as a woman of this century, thinking, I hope this nonsense is not still taking place in bars across America today. That's all, Joey.
Who could say? I have no idea. But I think what is so I guess it's not odd if you think it's like 1927 when this is published. He obviously never mentions that this is going to be abortion, which, like, anybody that's read this story, you can figure it out. But if you didn't know that, I mean, that's usually the first thing that's said about this story is that that's like the major thing that's being talked about. It's really the only thing that's being talked about. But it's sort of so strange to me that, like, it never gets mentioned. A child, there's no real indication that, and it's sort of almost hard to prove that it is a pregnancy. I mean, I know that's like the widely agreed reading of this story, and I don't disagree, of course, but you could make an argument that this is some other type of surgery. This is some other type of illness or something like that. You know, maybe she has cancer and he wants her to have a surgery to remove it, but you could do that. You could make an argument about that. I don't think that's what it is, but it is sort of frustrating when they're like, just name it, just say the thing that you're talking about. And I understand that, like, that's sort of an anachronistic reading because, of course, it's 1927. It's probably not something that's openly spoken about. And maybe he wanted some plausible deniability. He was maybe not talking about that. I don't know. I'd have to look into that to see if that's what was the case. There's even just like on this story level, it's just frustrating for Jig that this is such a momentous, well, maybe not momentous, is probably not the best word, but this is such a pivotal moment in her life that she has to make a decision and whether she wants to keep her pregnancy or not. And they can't even say it out loud. They can't even acknowledge that this is the decision that has to be made. And I am 100% on the side of women get to decide what the hell they want to do with their bodies. No one else gets to tell them in my world, okay? Again, we have a very different mentality probably than men in 1927 and probably someone like Ernest Hemingway who was probably like, well, I'm the man And so I get to tell you what you get to do. But again, it's like I would be curious of like, and it doesn't really matter, I guess. But to me, I'm thinking about it right now is like, well, where did Ernest Hemingway fall in this story? Like, was he like, yeah, the American should tell her to do this, or is he like neutral to not that it's important. It's not going to add to the story because it is this story. It's broken off of Ernest Hemingway and it is now its own thing, and it's up to us to determine that. But yeah, it's just that was part that I was like, I knew it was never going to be mentioned, but it is very frustrating to read about.
And Joy, what was irritating to me also as I was reading the story, it's like, are we really having this coded conversation at a train station bar? We're not having this conversation at home in bed. We are not doing this over the breakfast table. We are not doing this with the accompaniment of a priest or a counselor or anyone. We are throwing back the beers, and then we had that anise flavored drink, and then we're like, I think we
Mhm.
need more beers, so we got another beer. And then he walks off to the end of the train station to quote unquote put their bags at the appropriate spot, stops, has another shot, and then he walks back through the curtain to finish up with her. And this was just curious to me, of all the places where you could have this very important conversation, why is this conversation happening here? And for me, it was, I don't want to say a morality tale because it's not that, but for me, one of the things that the girl said is like, all we do is look around and see new things and drink. And the fact that they're having this momentous conversation about something important in their life that they cannot say the words. The girl could not say, I am pregnant. I am going to have a baby. Do you want to be a father? Can I be a mother? Like none of those words, none of those words are used. Zero, zero of those words are used. And I
Mhm.
thought, isn't that curious? But we do talk about licorice and we do talk about drinking and we do talk about traveling and what time the train gets here. And we have other very specific time markers. But the facts of life, we are unable to say them out loud, other than she is willing to do anything to make him happy so he doesn't worry. And again, for me, it's that female labor, that caretaking. I don't care what she says the words. I don't care what happens to me. I just want to make sure that you're happy. Are we going to go back to the life that we had before this event occurred? And I'm like, hell no. There is no way. There is no way their relationship is going to survive no matter what they do. For me, this was indicative of he was like, I'm going to bully you into having an abortion. She's going to have the abortion. And then she is going to get back with him. And she may, I'm again iceberging it. I went a little deeper. I dug my tunnel in there. I think she's going to resent the fact that she wasn't fully on board with this. She did it to make him happy. He's still going to be a drunk. He's still not going to want to marry her. He's still going to just be traveling and drinking all over the countryside. She's going to grow up, he, 5 years down the road and go, wait a minute, are we happy? Because this doesn't seem like happiness. And that was
Mhm.
where, at the very end, and I'll just read that last line and kind of get off this tangent. Do you feel better? He asked. I feel fine, she said. There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine. And again, because it's Ernest Hemingway, we don't know what fine means. Does fine mean I'm great, best day of my life, I'm resolved to this, or I'll be fine because I don't matter. And as long as the man is happy, we'll be okay. I don't know what fine means, but it made me mad all over the place. But I love that that's where he left it. The last word, fine.
Yeah, he obviously knows the nuance of that as well. Like that's why he obviously ended it like that. And I think in the maybe towards the beginning that she sort of felt like she was kind of wavering, like she wasn't completely made up. She had not completely made up her mind yet because when they're talking about the Anise del Toro, the alcohol, do you want it with water? I don't know, the girl said. Is it good with water? It's all right. You want them with water? Asked the woman. Yes, with water. It tastes like licorice, the girl said, and put the glass down. That's the way with everything. Yes, said the girl. Everything tastes of licorice, especially all the things you've waited so long for, like absinthe. To me, obviously, again, we have to read very deeply, or at least a little deeper into these lines, where I kind of felt like she was saying, like, I was really, maybe she was really waiting for a child. Maybe like motherhood was something that she was really excited about the potential of. And now that it was happening, she was kind of like, this thing that I wanted for such a long time, like, is it going to have a bitter taste? Some people like the taste of licorice, but I
It's not
mean,
for me, Joey.
I've never had absinthe, but maybe I'd like it. Who knows? But anyway, the point is that she was trying to. I felt like she was trying to be like, I don't know. I don't know that this will live up to my expectations of motherhood. That's again, I think like, what if he didn't keep pushing her? What if he just gave her the space to just think about it and just try to go through the emotions of whatever she was going through, of going through the fantasy of being a mother or continuing to live without children for however long she wanted, or maybe forever, which is fine. But he was so adamant, like it's just it's so simple. It's he says it's awfully simple. He says it's really an awfully simple operation, Jig. The man said it's not really an operation at all. First of all, really trying to sell it. He's hard selling this, but I think because Ernest Hemingway is so sparse in his writing and he doesn't usually use or he doesn't often use adjectives and adverbs, or he doesn't really rely on them. When he does use one, it kind of makes you like when he says it's really an awfully simple operation, you kind of have to pay closer attention to that because he made a conscious decision to add that word in when he maybe that's not typically something that he would go towards stylistically. So I think that line is very important to this story because I think that's maybe, or at least I interpreted that as what if he had not said that? If he wasn't trying so hard to convince her, if he would have just let it be for a little bit, or would have maybe like weighed the options with her again, that's not. It could be an anachronistic reading because that's like maybe that's probably not the societal dynamic at this point. To me, that is where she kind of goes like, okay, like, well, I don't know about that, sir. Even though she does eventually, then she's like, well, I'll just do it if you want me to. But I think she's sort of coaxing him and giving him a chance to take it back instead of being like super serious about it.
Joey, I really did love it when you read the sentence out loud because when you read it out loud, it had a different meaning to me. Everything tastes of licorice, especially all the things you've waited so long for, like absinthe. I
Mhm.
heard abstinence in that word, and I thought
Mhm.
that's not what it is. It's a really yummy green liquor that is very powerful. I have imbibed in that in the last 25 years. He says to her after she says that, she just says that an instant line, everything tastes like licorice, and I've been waiting for this for a very long time. Oh, cut it out. You started it, the girl said. I was being amused. I was having a fine time. I'm like, here we go with the fine again. And he said, well, let's try and have a fine time. All right, I was trying. I said the mountains looked like white elephants. Wasn't that bright? That was bright. I wanted to try this new drink. That's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks? I guess so. The girl looked across at the hills. And it's that disconnection that's fine. I'm trying to have fun here, Joey. And they're like, yeah, just have fun. I'm like, I was. Are you going to do it? And it was that kind of under tension of bickering of she's trying to have a serious conversation with him, but she also wants his adoration or approval to say, oh, you're trying to make light of the situation. Look at these elephants. And I just think there's a lot of course, under the surface that we insert our own ideas about what the motivation of the characters are. And in some ways, I'm like, Ernest Hemingway, you're a genius. You created the story. And wait a minute, it's kind of like the Margaret Atwood story that we read. We're doing all the work here. We're supplying the
Yeah.
motivations. We're supplying all of the dialogue that's going on in her head and his head and what I would have said if you weren't sitting there and we weren't so repressed and all of that. So it's just such an interesting exercise. But I also can say if people like a straightforward story where you say what you mean what you say, it's all spelled out, it's clear. This is not the story for you because I think the intention is, oh, look at this very simple story. But I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what you think it is. And I do appreciate that. I appreciate the brevity of his sentences. I appreciate there are no complex words. I think the most complex word in here was the name of the town, which was a river near the northern Spain. So it's like Ebro
Mhm.
was the most complicated word. And the word especially. Every other word in this story is teeny tiny fourth grade reading level words. There's nothing complex in it,
Mhm.
vocabulary wise. And I just think that's also interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there he does like to use repetition as well, which is why when we were reading it before, I was like, "Oh, did I just read that? Oh, no, I didn't. He's just repeating it." So there's a lot of things like once you get to know his style of writing, not that I have gotten to know it, but I have read about it, and so now I know it. There are certain things that you'll look for to be like, "Oh, this is significant when he's writing this type of thing," or he's when it's a repetition, it's important. If he's using an adjective or an adverb, let me make sure I'm paying attention. You should pay attention because it's only 6 pages long. But what I want to say also is that when I read this story a few times before our podcast, and the last time I read it out loud to myself, which I do all the time. But since this one was so dialogue heavy, I was like, oh, it's probably better if I read it out loud. And it did really change the feelings that I had in this story, which is funny that you just said that about the licorice statement, because I started to feel a little bit. No, I was always kind of Team Jig, I have to say. But I kind of felt like I understood her character better when I was reading it out loud and being able to emote it. I mean, obviously, the way that I wanted to, but she had more of an attitude when I did it. But maybe she does. I don't know. It's just words on a page. So, but it's a very interactive story. And you were just saying as well, Jennifer, that we get to fill in the blanks, and that could be lazy writing. Okay. But I think that Ernest Hemingway had to be really good at writing despite my dislike of his personal life, because another writer could have done this where they didn't give us any information. We could have walked away with like, ugh, screw this story. There's nothing in it. It's just bare bones. This is what stories start out as, but like you got to fill in the blanks. Whereas this one, I'm like, oh no, I feel like I have all the information I needed. Well, yeah, this is like the bare minimum. You need this much information to at least have a story. But I didn't necessarily want anything else from it because I had the space that Hemingway provides the reader to fill in everything else. I could give Jig a huge attitude because that's how I would do it if I were her. Or I could, be a little bit have a whinier tone as the American because that's how I would imagine this was happening. I did really love that about this story. It's sort of like we have read other ones that sort of put you in the story, like The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, where that's obviously Ursula K. Le Guin is pointing us out and it's like, hey, 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 you have to do this. I can't do this for you. But Ernest Hemingway is obviously not doing that explicitly. He's implicitly doing it.
Joey, I would love to wrap up this conversation by reading the first paragraph because as you were
Mhm,
speaking, something got my attention that I missed on the first several readings. It didn't click in my head.
mhm,
Back to my previous comment of why are we having this conversation at the train station in this moment instead of any other number of places that we could have this conversation about this unplanned pregnancy? So I'll just read this and then we will have a chat on that. The hills across the valley of the Ebro were long and white. On this side, there was no shade and no trees, and the station was between two lines of rails in the sun. Close against the side of the station, there was the warm shadow of the building, and a curtain made of a string of bamboo beads hung across the open door into the bar to keep the flies out. The American and the girl with him sat at a table in the shade outside the building. It was very hot, and the express train from Barcelona would come in 40 minutes. It stopped at this junction for 2 minutes and went on to Madrid. And the reason that caught my attention this time, they have a quick turnaround time to get on the train or they're going to miss this opportunity. They have got to move it. And in the 40 minutes that they sat there, not to keep harping on how much alcohol they're drinking at this time, but they've had at least
mhm.
3 to 4 drinks. And even for a seasoned drinker, that seems like that might be a large quantity in a short amount of time
With no food.
with nothing else other than no flies. But they were on the outside of the building, so they were just experiencing all the heat. So drinking in the heat of the day, probably not the most ideal relaxing conditions to be in. So I just thought that was very curious that he tells us we have 40 minutes, right? He's putting a bookend for us. This is going to be an abbreviated experience that we're having with them. When we were talking about this is a consequence she's going to have to live with for the remainder of her life, she either gets on, quote unquote, gets on the train and goes with him and has the abortion, or she stays back and does something different. I just think it's really quite poignant that life changing decisions are being made in such a short period of time. And obviously, this is not the first time they've talked about it. And it just
Mhm.
feels like he is browbeating her. It's like, are you going to do it or not? Come on, like you can do whatever you
Yeah.
want, but it'll be so great if you just do the thing I want you to do. No
Yeah.
pressure. No pressure,
Take
Joey. Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But man, I will be so pissed if you don't do what I tell you.
Yeah, it's like, "I'm giving you a choice, but I'm really not." I mean, okay? Yeah, he does a lot in such a small amount of time, not even just the time within the story, but in the page length and the word count. He is able to craft this whole story, even though it kind of like pissed me off to be able to have to say it out loud that I enjoy the story. I just want to be like, he was a shit person and he writes shit stuff. But
Not
he's
that
like,
simple,
yeah,
Joey. Not that
yeah.
simple.
And he's dead, so he's not getting my money anymore. So I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, it is a wonderful story. It is tough, especially if you have experienced something like that. I probably, trigger warning for that or content warning. Maybe this is not the story for you if that's something that is a tender subject for you. But it is a great story and it really shows you what an author can do with such a limited amount of language. We've read Angela Carter as someone that I will always think of as like the most purple prose writer that I can think of the top of my head, where she uses like every letter in the alphabet and every word that she's ever seen in a dictionary and a thesaurus, and she just like has them in her head forever. And that's a beautiful way of writing a story. And then we have like the polar opposite, which is just he's telling us a story. It's direct, it's clean, it's just here are the facts. You decide the rest. I'm not supplying the emotion here. There's no legwork from him other than, he crafted this whole story. So I guess I'll give it up to him for that. But yeah, he's not giving us anything else to work with.
Yeah, and Joey, I appreciate that because for me, his journalistic chops are in full display. I
Mhm.
am observing a scene. I am telling you the facts. I am describing things in enough detail for you to figure it out yourself. And I just thought that was really beautiful in that first opening paragraph. He's like, okay, let me just tell you this. And then, literally, from that moment on, it's all dialogue. There's maybe 6 or 10 sentences that are non dialogue in
Yeah,
that entire sequence. So it's like, let me set the scene and they'll just tell you what you need to know by not telling you anything that you need to know because they're not really saying the things that they should be saying to bring this to a good conclusion. So I just thought that was also very, very well done.
I agree.
Speaking of things that are very well done, I believe next week we will be talking about somebody who is recently become a favorite author of yours. Joey, I am really looking forward to reading another story by a new author, at least new to me, that you introduced me to. I don't want to reveal any secrets about the story that we will be reading. If you're interested, listeners, you can go to our website and see it on our page. And
Mhm,
yeah, I
mhm.
think it should be a great conversation and possibly in a much different style than the short story we just discussed today. Thank you for listening to the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. And don't worry, it'll be our little secret if you stepped out of your literary comfort zone. Looking for more ways to connect with us? Check out our link tree to follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Storygraph. And for the really lit curious, check out our website at extraliteraryAffairs.com.